Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Somewhere in the heart of Western Europe, in a city most people associate with chocolate bureaucracy and international politics, something remarkable has quietly happened. Roughly 1 in every 4 residents now identifies as Muslim, not in a distant suburb, not in a single neighborhood, across the entire city. This isn't a fringe estimate from a political pamphlet. It comes from demographic researchers, government statistics offices, and academic studies that have tracked this shift for decades. And yet most people outside the city, and honestly, many people inside it, have no real sense of just how significant this change has been. Today we're going deep into this city, how it happened, what daily life actually looks like, and why this particular capital has become one of the most closely studied examples of religious demographic change anywhere in Europe. Let's begin. Part 1. The city. The city we're talking about is Brussels, the capital of Belgium, and the de facto capital of the European Union itself. It's a city that hosts EU summits, houses NATO headquarters, and is home to diplomats and officials from nearly every country on Earth. It is, by any measure, one of the most internationally significant cities in the world, and according to a range of demographic estimates compiled over the past decade, somewhere between 20 and 25% of Brussels' population identifies as Muslim, making it, by a meaningful margin, the city with the highest proportional Muslim population of any national or supranational capital in Western Europe. To put that in perspective, in a city of roughly 1.2 million people, that means somewhere in the range of 250,000 to 300,000 residents identify as Muslim. That's larger than the entire population of many European cities in their own right. Part 2. How Brussels got here. This didn't happen overnight, and understanding the timeline is essential to understanding the city today. Like much of post-war Western Europe, Belgium faced a severe labor shortage in the 1960s as its economy rebuilt and industrialized. In 1964, the Belgian government signed a formal labor agreement with Morocco, followed shortly after by a similar agreement with Turkey. Thousands of workers arrived under these programs, initially expected to work for a few years and return home. As happened across much of Europe, most stayed, brought over their families, and began building permanent communities. These early Moroccan and Turkish communities settled heavily in specific districts of Brussels, most notably Molenbeek, Schaerbeek, and Anderlecht, areas that remain some of the most visibly Muslim neighborhoods in the city today. Over subsequent decades, further waves of migration, driven by family reunification policies, ongoing labor migration, and later, refugees from conflicts in the Middle East and North Africa, steadily grew the city's Muslim population. By the 1990s, demographers were already noting Brussels' unusually high concentration of Muslim residents compared to other Western European capitals. That trajectory has continued largely uninterrupted since, driven by the same combination of factors we've discussed in other videos. A relatively young population with higher average birth rates, ongoing migration, and ongoing family formation within established communities. Part 2b. A city of 2 languages, many faiths. There's something uniquely complex about Brussels that makes this story even more interesting. The city itself has never had a single, unified identity to begin with. Brussels sits at the linguistic and cultural fault line of Belgium itself, officially bilingual between French and Dutch, and historically caught between Flemish and Walloon political interests. This built-in complexity, some sociologists argue, actually made it easier for a third major cultural and religious identity to establish itself. Unlike a city with one dominant, deeply entrenched national culture, Brussels was already a city accustomed to negotiating difference long before its Muslim population began to grow. The European Union's decision to headquarter its institutions in Brussels starting in the 1950s added yet another layer, transforming the city into one of the most genuinely international urban centers on the continent, home to diplomats, EU civil servants, and workers from virtually every nation on Earth. By the time Brussels' Muslim population began its most significant growth phase in the 1980s and 90s, the city was already, in a real sense, a city of outsiders building something new together. Part 3. Meet Yasmin. Numbers tell part of the story. People tell the rest. Yasmin was born in Molenbeek in the early 1990s, the daughter of Moroccan parents who arrived in Brussels in the late 1970s as part of the family reunification wave. She describes growing up completely bilingual in identity, French at school, Darija Arabic at home, and a lived Islamic practice woven naturally through both worlds. People from outside Brussels are always shocked when I describe my neighborhood, she said. Growing up, being Muslim wasn't unusual or remarkable in any way. It was just normal. My friends were Muslim, Christian, secular, Jewish. Molenbeek has always been more mixed than people from the outside assume. Yasmin now works as a school teacher in the same district where she grew up, and she's watched the demographic shift continue even within her own lifetime. When I was a kid, maybe a third of my class was Muslim. Now, teaching in the same neighborhood, it's closer to two-thirds in some schools. The city keeps changing, generation by generation. She's also candid about the tension that comes with visibility. Brussels gets talked about in international media in a way that feels disconnected from how we actually live here. After certain events, she's referring carefully to the 2016 Brussels terror attacks, which were partly linked to individuals from Molenbeek. The whole neighborhood got treated like a suspect. That was incredibly painful for a community that had nothing to do with what happened, and it's a label we're still working to shed. Part 4. What daily life actually looks like. Walk through neighborhoods like Molenbeek or Schaerbeek today, and the scale of this demographic reality becomes immediately visible. Halal butchers and grocery stores are as common as any other shop. The call to prayer, while not broadcast publicly the way it might be in a Muslim-majority country, structures the daily rhythm of community life around dozens of mosques scattered throughout the city. Modest fashion boutiques sit alongside typical European storefronts. Arabic and Turkish signage appears as frequently as French and Dutch, Belgium's two official languages. Brussels' school system has had to adapt substantially. Several public schools in heavily Muslim districts now serve halal meal options as standard, and many have adjusted exam calendars to avoid clashing with Eid celebrations. Some schools report Muslim students making up the outright majority of their student body, a reality that would have been almost unthinkable to Belgian policymakers just a few decades ago. Economically, the Muslim community has become deeply embedded in the fabric of the city. Moroccan and Turkish-owned businesses are a significant part of Brussels' commercial landscape, and the broader Belgian halal economy, food, finance, retail, has grown into a substantial economic sector in its own right. Religious life in Brussels has also become significantly more organized and visible over the past 2 decades. The Great Mosque of Brussels, housed in a striking pavilion originally built for 1897 colonial exhibition and later gifted to Belgium's Muslim community by King Baudouin in 1967, remains the city's most prominent Islamic institution, serving as both a place of worship and a broader cultural and educational center. Alongside it, dozens of smaller neighborhood mosques, many converted from former warehouses, garages, or storefronts, serve the day-to-day religious needs of specific communities, often organized along national lines with distinct Moroccan, Turkish, and more recently, Syrian and Iraqi congregations, each maintaining their own institutions and traditions. During Ramadan, the transformation of neighborhoods like Molenbeek and Schaerbeek becomes especially visible. Streets fill in the evenings with families breaking their fast together. Local restaurants extend their hours to serve iftar meals, and community centers host large shared dinners that draw hundreds of residents. City officials have in recent years begun formally acknowledging these celebrations, with some municipal buildings hosting official Eid receptions, a small but symbolically significant shift toward institutional recognition. Part 5. The harder reality. It would be dishonest to present this story without acknowledging the very real friction that exists alongside this growth. Molenbeek in particular has struggled with an international reputation problem, largely stemming from its association with the perpetrators of the 2016 Brussels bombings and links to the 2015 Paris attacks. International media coverage often reduced an entire diverse district of over 90,000 people to a single alarming label, Europe's Jihadi Central, a characterization that residents like Yasmin describe as both deeply unfair and lastingly damaging. Unemployment in some of Brussels' Muslim-majority districts remains significantly higher than the city average, a gap researchers attribute to a mix of factors: language barriers among older immigrants, discrimination in hiring documented in Belgian labor market studies, and the compounding effects of geographic and economic segregation that built up over decades. Belgian politics has also been shaped significantly by this demographic reality. Debates over religious symbols in public institutions, halal slaughter practices, and the integration of Muslim communities into broader Belgian civic life remain persistent, often contentious topics in national political discourse. Far-right parties have gained ground in recent elections, partly by campaigning directly on anxieties related to Brussels' religious demographic shift. At the same time, Brussels has also become a genuine laboratory for integration efforts. Interfaith initiatives, community policing reforms following the 2016 attacks, and targeted investment in historically underserved districts have all been part of an ongoing imperfect effort to address these tensions constructively rather than simply managing them through rhetoric. The 2016 attacks in particular forced a broader national reckoning. In their aftermath, Belgian authorities significantly increased funding for youth outreach programs in Molenbeek and similar districts aimed at addressing the social isolation and economic marginalization that researchers identified as key vulnerabilities exploited by extremist recruiters, themselves a tiny, unrepresentative fraction of the broader community. Local imams and community leaders became increasingly vocal partners in these efforts, publicly and repeatedly condemning extremism while working to shield their communities from the collective blame that followed the attacks. Belgian federal politics remains, nonetheless, a genuinely contested space on these issues. Debates over banning religious symbols like the hijab in certain public sector jobs have played out in Belgian courts for years, with rulings that have gone in different directions depending on the specific context and region. Flemish nationalist parties in particular have built significant portions of their political platforms around skepticism toward Brussels' religious demographic trajectory, while French-speaking Walloon political culture has generally, though not universally, taken a more accommodating public stance. Part 6. What the future looks like. Demographers studying Brussels' trajectory generally agree on one thing: this trend isn't reversing anytime soon. Given the relatively young age structure of the city's Muslim population and continued family formation within established communities, most projections suggest Brussels' Muslim population share will continue growing over the coming decades, potentially approaching or exceeding a third of the city's total population by mid-century. What that future actually looks like, whether it resembles Yasmin's description of a genuinely comfortably mixed city, or whether ongoing tensions around integration and economic disparity deepen, will depend heavily on choices being made today by city planners, by national politicians, and by residents themselves on both sides of Brussels' complex religious and cultural divide. What's certain is that Brussels offers something increasingly rare, a real lived preview of what a genuinely religiously mixed European capital looks like. Not in theory, not in projection, but in practice, today, in the streets, schools, and neighborhoods of one of the most internationally significant cities on Earth. Closing. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Brussels, a city that more than almost any other in Europe shows us what the future of religious demographics on this continent might actually look like. If you found this video insightful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. It genuinely helps us keep bringing you honest, well-researched content like this. If you have thoughts, questions, or experiences of your own related to this topic, we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. We look forward to having you join us on our next journey. Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.